This is a podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online, the online resource for all construction professionals that's available 24/7. Now please don't forget to subscribe at the place you usually get your podcasts so as not to miss a thing from this second series, as well as visiting our YouTube channel. If you're listening to this in the UK, I hope that you're enjoying this gorgeous weather just now. Let's hope it lasts. Hello again and welcome to another podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online. As usual, Barney, my red Labrador, is here to offer advice and to keep an eye on things. And by the way, Barney and I would really appreciate it if you would like to write a review. If you're new to Duncan Cartlidge Online podcasts, welcome. Please don't forget to subscribe, as well as catching up with previous episodes. If you're already a subscriber, thank you for your support. In this blockbuster episode, we will look at risk, the elephant in the room, and corruption. Is it just the way construction business is done? So, let's start off with risk, the elephant in the room. It's an unfortunate statistic that the construction sector has one of the highest rates of attrition among UK industries. And insolvency is not just confined to the small builder who starts trading without doing their homework. The last few years have seen the demise of construction giants such as Peril and ISG, and seen other Tier 1 contractors just trying to make a profit. A major cause of failure is poor risk management, in a market where most work is still gained by competitive tendering and bottom line figures. It's tempting to ignore the elephant in the room, that's risk, and just go for it. It is still an industry where sustainability is given lip service along with value for money and whole life costs. It is an industry where the risks are greater than most sectors, and there is still a tendency to fly by the seat of your pants and hope that things will go according to plan, which of course they seldom do. Latham, in his 1994 report, recognised the potential impact of risk and warned that it should never be ignored. I'll start with a cautionary tale about one of the UK's most prestigious contractors, John Lang, or John Lane if you live in Scotland. I'll use Lang. John Lang Construction was established in 1848 by, believe it or not, John Lang, and over the next 100 years or so became one of the UK's most established and respected building contractors. John Lang Construction became the go-to contractor for many prestige public and private sector building projects, including the M1 motorway, Coventry Cathedral, Birmingham Bullring, the British Library, and the second Severn Crossing, to name but a few. In 1996, it was proposed to build a new stadium in Cardiff for the Welsh Rugby Union. The Millennium Stadium, as it became known, had a sliding roof, and the contract was let on a guaranteed maximum or fixed price basis. John Lang won the tender, and work started in 1997 and had to be complete for the Rugby World Cup in 1999. In what has been since called a mixture of naivety and ignorance, John Lang Construction failed to analyse the risks involved in the construction of the sliding roof, resulting in a loss on the project of £26 million, or £60 million in today's prices. This resulted in the company laying off 800 employees. In what can only be described as a very poor sense of timing, John Lang also got involved as part of the Lazier Consortium in a private finance initiative project, the £130 million National Physical Laboratory at Teddington. The Teddington scheme went wrong when John Lang again failed to identify the risks and to take account of the specifications needed for scientists and engineers to conduct delicate measurements, resulting in the project needing to be built with exacting tolerances, which the contractor had not identified. For example, one key failing was the air conditioning for the building, which caused vibration problems. John Lang had to walk away from the project with losses of £79 million or £184 million in today's prices. The Teddington laboratory led to losses that John Lang was unwilling to disclose. However, figures show that the construction division lost £88.9 million in this period, or an eye-watering £200 million at today's prices. A subsequent National Audit Office inquiry and the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee laid the blame at the feet of both John Lang and the client. Again, managers at Lang Construction were found guilty of naivety and arrogance in taking on the disastrous PFI contract without fully identifying the risks. The outcome was inevitable. John Lang, a contractor that had been involved in successful tenders for over 150 years, failed to properly assess the risks involved in two major projects, resulting in unsustainable losses. As a result, in 2001, it was sold to one of his concrete subcontractors, Ray O'Rourke, for £1, and quit construction to concentrate on property and house building. There's a sort of happy ending to this story. Lang O'Rourke is today one of the UK's largest building and civil engineering contractors, although many such cases don't end so happily. John Lang is active in an investment company specialising in businesses and platforms which manage physical assets with long-term predictable and resilient cash flows, such as wind farms and public-private partnerships. If poor risk analysis and management can bring about the downfall of contractors like John Lang Construction, it can happen to anybody. Interestingly, a couple of years ago, I approached John Lang when I was writing an article about the downfall of the company for permission to use some photographs of the Millennium Stadium and the National Physical Laboratory, and received a very swift "go away," or words to that effect. So why is construction so vulnerable to risk? When supply chain management became a household term in the 1980s, there were many who advocated that this approach could easily be applied to construction. There were those who immediately responded, impossible. Supply chain management is okay for manufacturing industries where the environment can be controlled, such as car manufacture, but construction has too many variables, such as unpredictable weather, different locations, bespoke designs, etc. Now, while I agree with some of this, by adopting supply chain management in the 1950s, Japanese shipbuilding managed to overcome many of the same problems, that's to say weather, bespoke designs, etc., to become leaders and close down many UK shipyards. For some reason, construction still hangs on to these problems. Analysis by Mott MacDonald shows that the main risk areas in construction are: top of the list, inadequate business case; second, not unsurprisingly, disputes and claims; followed closely by poor contractor management team competency. Interestingly, as a result of the Grenfell Tower disaster, there is currently a campaign to upskill the construction industry, as we have all assumed for too long it appears the contractors know what they're doing. Of course, the good old QS approach to allowing for unexpected cost is contingencies, which, in addition to a lump sum, includes concealing pockets of money in the bills of quantities for what experience has shown will be the inevitable extras. For example, one large London-based practice was notorious for digging fictitious holes and filling them in to provide little pockets of so-called bunts, which, like a rabbit being pulled out of a conjurer's hat, would be found to compensate for extras. For some people, it was one of the QS's greatest talents. Since the launch of the NRM suite, it is now suggested the term contingency should not be used, in favour of risk allowances, arrived at after a carefully considered risk assessment. In practice, we all know what happens: seaweed out of the window. Can we get away with 3%? We'll use that. The NRM suite divides risk into 4 categories, as well as giving the opportunity for clients to ask contractors to quote for accepting all risks for defined parts of the work, for example, the substructure. This approach is particularly appealing to clients who want and are prepared to pay for price certainty. The sting in the tail for clients is if the risk doesn't materialise, then the contractor still receives the risk premium. It's a bit like a game of poker. Part of the rationale for the widespread use of the private finance initiative in the 1990s and early 2000s was that risk was transferred from the public sector, who had never been very good at managing it, to the private sector, as the facility, hospitals, schools, etc., could not start to produce an income to pay off the debt until it was open for business. Now, the reason I mention the PFI is because it is looking more and more likely that a form of this once loathed procurement method, not in my opinion incidentally, will see a comeback. An announcement is promised in June. The traditional approach to managing risk has been to pass it down the supply chain like a hot potato, which cuts across the fundamentals of risk management. In some contract forms, NEC for example, the use of risk registers is an established way of recording risks during the construction process, and procedures are put in place to allow the parties to agree whether risks should be carried on by one party or another party, or they should be shared or indeed eliminated. The questions that must be addressed are: what are the risks? What could go wrong? What will their impact be? And what is the likelihood of the risks occurring? There are a number of tried and tested techniques to help answer these questions, and they are explained in detail in the project management video library of Duncan Cartlidge online. Yes, a quick plug. So the moral of the story is: ignore the risk elephant at your peril. Now, on to another elephant. Corruption. Is it just the way we do business in construction? In what can only be described as another shameful episode that does little to enhance the reputation of UK construction, the Serious Fraud Office has launched a multi-million-pound international bribery investigation centred on Blue 3, the former associates of Mace. Blue 3, founded in 2004, manages large construction projects and has helped Mace in the construction of the Shard in London, and was involved in the regeneration of London Battersea Power Station and the Chelsea Barracks. It has also worked on HS2 railway projects and for Transport for London and Thames Water. The Serious Fraud Office said that individuals of Blue 3 are suspected of paying over £3 million in bribes to former associates of the Mace Group in relation to the construction of a data centre in the Netherlands for Microsoft. In a series of dramatic raids, I don't know if there were dawn and doors were smashed in, but more than 70 Serious Fraud Office staff searched homes and commercial property across London, Kent, Surrey and Somerset to seize evidence and made 3 arrests. Not unsurprisingly, it should be noted that both Mace and Blue 3 have released statements stating that they have zero tolerance to all forms of bribery. In another recent case, 6 people, including 3 construction bosses and 2 former employees at energy company E.ON, have been sentenced to up to 46 months in prison for their involvement in a criminal conspiracy linked to a major housing development in East Devon. The ex-E.ON employees were found to have accepted bribes, including cash, high-end hotel rooms, and access to luxury cars, amongst other bribes, to ensure that companies that made legitimate and fair bids lost out on their work. There was no wrongdoing on the part of the energy company. The bribes started in 2011 and continued to the end of 2015, when E.ON discovered and reported the illegal activity. E.ON's head of projects and subsequently head of building for the project, a quantity surveyor, responsible for signing off works, stated in his evidence that he believed corrupt practice was widespread in the construction industry and the method by which business was done. And you know, he probably thought this to be the case, and what a damning indictment on construction. And lastly, 3 former site managers at Keltbray, the demolition contractor, were found guilty of taking bribes totalling more than £600,000 over 6 years, and also have received prison sentences. Between 2012 and 2018, the group was found to have profited £22 million in unpaid tax, as well as a further £2 million from support of a large-scale drug supply operation in the southeast of the UK. The group would systematically withhold tax money, VAT, from HMRC, making agreements with construction and logistic companies acting as fronts to divert the money. These cases are just the tip of the iceberg, the ones who have been caught. I suppose the only way to deter corruption is to hand out stiff prison sentences. Now finally, I'm sure that you're sick and tired of hearing about Mothgate, but how long does it take for the RICS to conduct its secret internal inquiry into what happened? The facts of Mothgate appear to be straightforward. The conclave has nothing on this. We've already seen the white smoke in Rome, and this is long before the RICS decide to let members know what exactly is going on. Well, that's all for this episode. I hope that you found it interesting. Thank you for listening to the end. You certainly have stamina. This has been a podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online. Barney, who incidentally is loving this warm weather, and I would really appreciate it if you were to spread the word, subscribe, and, if you have time, write a review. Until next time, take care.